We'll get started. Okay, let's start with the structure of the eye overall. And hopefully this will come through. Okay, what you see here is just a sagittal section through an eyeball. Okay, this is the back, this is the front of the eye over here. And thinking about the eye, the structure of the eye, there's a couple of parts to the protective layer, which is the outermost layer for the eye. The first part, that's the outermost layer of the eye itself, see this, is going to be the white part of your eye, and I'll just kind of redraw the white part of your eye. The white part goes about 5/6 of the way around the entire eye. Okay, one side and then the other side. So all this is a protective layer. That's the white part of the eye. Does anyone know what that's called? What's the white of the eye called? Yeah. So this is known as the sclera. S-C-L-E-R-A. And the sclera is the white of the eye, and it's a protective layer. Okay, as we go through, we'll talk about the 3 different layers of the eye, and you should know that the sclera, which is the white of the eye, all the way around, is first protective layer. And we also have another part that's a protective layer, and that's here in the very front. We're going to have, this is a clear layer. It's still a protective layer, but it's clear so that light can pass through the eye. Does anyone know what that's called? Yeah, that's your cornea. So cornea is going to be a protective layer. Okay, so the first layer, makes sense it would be protective. You have the sclera, most of the eyeball, and then in the very front of the eye you have a clear layer, and that's your cornea. Both are protective layers. And moving on back, we have part of the vascular layer. Okay, the eye has a couple of parts to the vascular layer. This first part, just under the sclera, is known as your choroid. This is a choroid, C-H-O-R-O-I-D, and that's part of the vascular layer. Okay, so realize this is a cross section, so it's all the way around the eye as we're going through. But it's pretty good blood supply here. Provides vasculature to the eye. Okay, so the next layer under the protective layer of the sclera and the cornea is going to be your choroid, and that's a vascular layer. Okay, coming off of the choroid, as the choroid progresses anteriorly, it starts to thicken into a muscle. Okay, and that muscle again is here. And this is also part of the vascular layer of the eye. This is going to be the muscle that's responsible for changing the shape of the lens of the eye. Does anybody know what that muscle is? Any chance? No? Okay. This is your, it's an extension off your choroid, and it's known as the ciliary body. Again, it's part of the vascular layer. Okay, so sclera and cornea, protective layers, and then underneath that you have your choroid. Choroid thickens as it comes anteriorly to become a muscle. That muscle is known as the ciliary body. Ciliary body is going to be responsible for changing the shape of the lens, a combination of them. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go forward a little bit. Let's talk about the third layer. Okay, underneath the vascular layer is going to be another layer that's known as the photoreceptor layer. Okay, and these just neural cells here that form the photoreceptor layer, and axons coming out of these cells come together to form the second cranial nerve, or the optic nerve. So these are just axons that are all traveling together out of this photoreceptor layer, coming together to form the second cranial nerve. So this is going to be coming through, exiting through the back of the eyeball. This is going to be your optic nerve, which is cranial nerve 2. Okay, and as I said, this is going to be your photoreceptive layer. Does anybody know what that's called, the name of it? That's your retina. Okay, your photoreceptive layer is going to be your retina. And it's a photoreceptive layer. Photoreceptive layer is composed of two different kinds of cells. Anybody know what those are? Yeah, There's going to be rods. So the first is going to be rods, and the rods are 20 times more prevalent than the cones. Okay, and does anyone know, do rods work in bright light, dim light? What do they see? Any thoughts? Yeah, they're good for dim vision, dim light, peripheral vision, so peripheral movement, and actually motion. So in CP3 in the spring, you're going to learn to check peripheral vision, and I can tell you you're going to be having the person look straight ahead, and then you're going to be asking them to point to your fingers when they're wiggling. You're going to check 4 different quadrants. We're going to learn today why you check 4 different quadrants. But since it's peripheral vision, the patient's just using rods, not cones. Okay. And the cones, another part of the receptive layer, are for central vision. Bless you. Everything right up front, what you see in front of you, they're the detail, so they're good with fine detail and color. Okay, and they like bright light. Okay, so 2 basic parts of the photoreceptive layer, the rods and the cones. The rods are 20 times more prevalent. They're good for peripheral vision. They detect motion really well. They function fine in dimmer light. And the cones are going to be good for central vision. They require bright light. They're detail and color, so where you see things very clearly. With your rods, you just see motion. Cones, you can read things. You can identify things very clearly. Questions? 3 different layers: protective, sclera, and cornea; vascular, choroid and ciliary body; photoreceptive layer, your retina, photoreceptive, made of rods and cones. Okay, so moving forward, let's look at in here, behind the cornea, you have this lens in your eye. Okay, and the lens is there. It's going to be able to focus light at a specific part of the retina that has a high prevalence of cones. Okay, so this is going to be the lens of the eye. And the lens of the eye is connected to the ciliary body via ligaments, and these ligaments are known as suspensory. So the lens is just suspended from the ciliary body. Okay, so let me write that down. So these ligaments that hold the lens and attach it to the ciliary body are known as suspensory. S-U-S-P-E-N-S-A-R-Y, ligaments. And you can imagine that as the ciliary body contracts, it pulls on the ligaments, it's going to flatten out the lens, and as the ciliary body relaxes, it's going to allow the ligaments to relax. You might have rounding up of the lens. Okay, and the lens's job is just to take in the incoming light and focus it back here on a part of the retina. Let's make that purple. So there's this structure back here. And it's part of the retina outright, but it's a special part of the retina that's high in the concentration of cones. Anyone know what that's called? That's your macula. You know, the macula is nothing more than that part of the eye that's really high in concentration of cones, so it's really important for central vision, so what you see right in front of you. So when light comes in, it's the job of the lens to change shape and focus whatever's in your vision to the macula. And the macula has a special little dimple in it right here that's the highest concentration of cones. And that little space is called your fovea. F-O-V-E-A. So that's it for the photoreceptive layer overall. And you also have another space. Back here in the back of your eyeball, you actually have a hole. Yes?
Make sure you don't lean back in that chair.
Okay. Thanks. I'm good. I just needed to sit down just for a little bit. You have a hole here in the back of your eyeball where the second cranial nerve exits. Okay, that hole is known as the optic disc. So I'll just kind of circle this space. It's really just the space, and it's a hole right in your vision, right there. And that hole actually creates a blind spot. Okay, so the hole is here, where that second cranial nerve comes through, and that's known as your optic disc. And since you have a hole there, it's actually part of your brain's job to fill in that hole with what it thinks the image should look like. It's kind of cool. Question?
Just to double check, is the macula on the bottom too?
The macula is in one space, so typically I've seen it depicted up here. It's a very specific area that the lens is able to focus right on. So yeah, think about it as like a thing, like a shape of thing. So the retina is all the way around, but the macula is like a big circle kind of thing in one spot. And that's where you have your greatest concentration of cones. It's important for central vision. Okay. Has anyone ever heard of the problem called macular degeneration? Yeah? Do you know what people see or what they don't see with macular degeneration? Right in the center. There's a big hole there. Okay, they can see everything around the outside. It's kind of interesting because my father was diagnosed with macular degeneration years ago now. And, he's like, I had no idea that I couldn't see what was right in front of me until the guy asked me to put my hand over one eye and then look out the other. It's like, well, there's a big hole there. So that's macular degeneration. A lot of times people, if they have macular degeneration, if you have patients in your future who have macular degeneration in both eyes, they really can't see you if you're right ahead, but they can see enough to follow you because they can see the motion on the sides. Okay, so they really can't see the detail, but they can see shadows. Okay, so that's the job of the macula, and you don't have any central vision. Now let's inside here, inside the eyeball proper, there's a gelatinous matrix. Okay, that gelatinous matrix is called vitreous humor. So this is all just a gelatinous matrix that exists inside between the back of the eyeball and the lens. And this gelatinous matrix is known as vitreous, V-I-T-R-E-O-U-S, humor, H-U-M-O-R. Has anyone ever had or heard of people that have floaters in their eyes, which are, things that you see? That the floaters are in the vitreous humor. Is there a question? Any questions? Yeah? Ben? Oh, see it? Oh, V-I-T-R-E-O-U-S, vitreous. So here it is, V-I-T-R-E-O-U-S, vitreous humor. Okay. Any other questions? Everything good? Okay. Now there's one more kind of humor, where the vitreous humor is a gelatinous matrix that's inside here. This is going to be more of a liquid matrix. It's just a liquid substance here that is between the cornea and the lens of the eye. And so it's a liquid substance, so remember it's aqueous humor. A-Q-U-E-O-U-S, humor. And that's nothing more than the liquid between the cornea and the lens of the eye. So if you get a buildup of aqueous humor in here, does anyone know what that problem causes? Yeah, glaucoma, good. Yeah, glaucoma. You guys have been tested when you go to the eye doctor, they do that little puff, right? That little puff that everybody hates. When you get that puff, that's what they're testing for. They're testing for the buildup of aqueous humor. And that's going to cause a problem called glaucoma. Okay, visual changes. Early on, there really aren't any major visual changes with glaucoma that you can detect. Patient might complain about pain in the eye, though. That's going to be the only sign early on. And what happens is this aqueous humor is continuously turned over, so it's constantly drained and replenished. So that's why when the place where it drains is not working properly, that's what causes the glaucoma. Okay, and then the other one that patients in your future might have are cataracts. Everybody heard of cataracts? So signs and symptoms of cataracts are going to be different. It's no more than, cataracts is nothing more than the clouding of the lens here. So that lens builds up crystalline deposits, and those crystalline deposits cause problems with vision. And what happens is the light can't pass through the lens very much anymore, so everything gets cloudy. My husband had cataracts early, and he had both of them replaced. What they actually do is they do a surgery and they remove your lens that's cloudy, and they give you a prosthetic lens, and your vision is so much better. But once you have that surgery, since you're so used to little light coming through because of the cataract problem, everything's really, really bright. So those people are really, really sensitive to brighter lights. Okay? And those are really the three things that you might hear about in the future: are glaucoma, macular degeneration, and cataracts. Questions? We good? Okay, great. So this is the structure of the eye. Let's move on to the next one, which is control of the lens and the pupil. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to zoom right in. The next picture is control of the lens and the pupil. I'm zooming into this space right here. Okay? So right here, we're just going to blow that area up and look to see what happens in that area. So, like I said before, we were looking at it like this. So this is the eyeball. Now I'm going to do is just turn it like this so we have more space filled in. Okay. And thinking about the whole thing again, we want to do the protective layers. Main protective layer on the outside is the white of your eye. That's the sclera. And then in the front, the other protective layer over just the front of the eyeball, that's your cornea. We talked about the choroid being next. That's going to be the vascular layer that comes up. And then as it goes forward, it starts to thicken and becomes the ciliary body. You guys have questions? Okay. Going back, this is your ciliary body, part of the vascular layer of the eye. Okay, so that's what we've seen so far. The color that it is green. And then behind the cornea, we saw that there was a lens to the eye. Oh. Here's your lens. It's the lens of the eye. And the lens was attached to the ciliary body via suspensory ligaments. There's your suspensory ligaments. Okay, now that we're zoomed in nice and close, there's one more structure I can draw for you. And this is going to be an appendage that comes off of the ciliary body. Okay, this is going to be the part of the eye that determines its color. Does anybody know what that's called? Yeah, it's your iris. This person has blue eyes. I'm going to make iris here. So iris coming in on both sides. It's nothing more than an extension off your ciliary body. That's your iris. so this person has blue eyes. Okay, the iris has a couple of important muscles that we need to know about. The first muscle I'm going to put here. Again, this is a cross section. So here's the muscle. It's just going to exist, and it's going to be all the way around. Oh, the space that comes in. What's the space between your iris called? That's your pupil. Write that down. So the space right here where light can come in is going to be your pupil. And on the very tip of your iris, you have a special kind of muscle. Okay, it actually goes all the way around the iris on the inside. It just surrounds your pupil. Okay, and one way to remember which one is which is if this muscle contracted, what would happen to the shape of the iris? Would it constrict or would it dilate? Yeah, constrict, right? So that's the constrictor pupillae. This muscle on the outside, all the way around the outside of the iris, is called your constrictor pupillae. Okay, and then, again, going all the way around, you have a muscle. It's going to be a muscle that goes all the way from here, all the way back. And it's all the way around the inside of the iris. Again, an easy way to remember that is to think about what will happen if this muscle constricts or contracts. Is it going to cause the iris to, or the pupil to constrict or dilate? Anybody see that? So if I contract, yeah, so I can see how the pupil opens up. If this muscle contracts, this opens up this space. That's called the dilator pupillae. So two different muscles. So the dilator pupillae is going to be the muscle in the iris that causes pupillary dilation. Trinity, do you have a question?
Yeah, on your slides following along, is there another name for the constrictor pupillae?
Constrictor, sphincter, pupilla. I think it's constrictor pupilla. That's what I have from before. Is it?
Okay.
Yeah, constrictor pupillae.
Yeah, is there one that says sphincter pupillae?
Sphincter pupillae. Is that on the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's call those two interchangeable then. Okay, constrictor pupillae is what I've used in the past. Sphincter pupillae. Let's just say that's another word for it. Okay, so your dilator pupillae, if it contracts, you're going to cause pupillary dilation, right? So you're going to get bigger pupils. And does anybody know if that's a sympathetic or a parasympathetic response? So if the tiger's chasing you down the road, do you want your pupils to be let in more light or less? More light, right? So this is under sympathetic control. The dilator pupillae is under sympathetic control. Okay, the sympathetic control, that's going to be important for when we look at loss of sympathetic innervation with the sympathetic tract when we get to the brainstem vascular syndromes. Okay. And again, the ciliary body here, we talked about the ciliary body being important for the shape of the lens. So you have your ciliary body that's important for the shape of the lens. So if that constricts, the ciliary body contracts, that's going to flatten out the lens. If it relaxes, you're going to round up the lens. Okay, and that's lens, yes?
So does that mean the constrictor pupillae is parasympathetic?
Mm-hmm. Going to talk about that? That's what I was going. Absolutely. So the constrictor pupillae, sphincter pupillae, and the ciliary body, if you remember, we talked about accommodation, lens accommodation, and we also talked about pupillary constriction being under the control of what nucleus was that? Edinger-Westphal, right. So these guys are under parasympathetic control. And you remember Edinger-Westphal with the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So these are parasympathetic, and they're under the control of Edinger-Westphal nucleus in the midbrain. Any questions? So essentially, if you had a problem with Edinger-Westphal, you're going to have a problem with lens accommodation, which means changing the shape of the lens because of the innervation to the ciliary body. And you're also going to have a problem with a pupillary constriction. Okay, you're going to have great big old dilated pupils all the time. In contrast, if you have a problem with sympathetic control, and you're going to see it's called the sympathetic tract, you're going to end up with constricted pupils because your dilator pupillae is under sympathetic control, sympathetic innervation. Any other questions? Okay, we'll just keep on moving on. So from here, we're going to go to visual fields. Okay, looking at visual fields. So I can tell you this is going to be an important part for being able to follow everything on through. Okay, I've had students in the past who get confused with this part, and we'll just go through it slowly. Just make sure you understand this part because it's going to apply for everything that we do from here on. And the way that I've tried to describe it, that I think works the best, is if you kind of do it along with me. Okay, and that is if you take your left hand and cover your left eye and looks directly in front of you, can you see anything out of your right eye that is past your nose? Yeah, just a little bit though, right? You can't see the whole on the outside. If you do the same thing with your right eye, you have the same result. You can't see the far right. You can actually put your hand out there and see how far you can see. You can't see very much past your nose, just a little bit, but it's there, right? So that means both eyes can see both sides. Okay, the left eye can see a little bit of the right, and the right eye can see a little bit of the left, but it can't see the far outside of the opposite eye. Does that make sense to everybody? If we keep doing it, hopefully it'll work. Okay, now this is my rendition. This is the right eyeball, and this is the left eyeball, and help you in drawing a little bit of a pupil there. My black marks. There's my pupil. And here's my nose. Okay, so we're going to talk about the nasal fields as well as temporal fields. Temporal is like on the outside of your eye. There's your eyeball, and then there's your nose. So everybody see where we are? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw your total visual field up here, and I'm going to use two colors. I'm going to use red and blue. So your total visual field, everything on the right side. Okay, I'm going to try and make it about in the middle. So this is about the middle of my nose. Okay, everything on the right side, this is going to be what I see on the right. It's going to be red in color. I'm doing that because we're going to follow back our visual fields a little bit. Right for red. Red for right. And then on the left side, I'm going to make it blue. And this is everything on your left visual field. So if I were looking straight ahead, right at my nose would be the divider between the right color, the red color, and the blue color. You see that? Okay, now with my right eye, the next line down, This is just what my right eye alone can see. If I covered up my left eye, this is what I would see with my right eye. Okay? And what we just did is we found out you could see everything on the right side with your right eye, but you can see just a little bit of what's on the left side, but not the whole thing. All right, so I can see just a little bit past my nose, which I'll call my middle. So I see all of the red, but not all of the blue, just a little bit of the nasal portion of the blue on the left. Everybody see that? Okay. Same thing happens if I cover my right eye. What I can see with my left eye is going to be here all the way over to the end of the left visual field. Okay, so the entire visual field on the left if I have my right eye covered, but just a little bit of the right visual field. I'm not going to be able to see all the way to the end. Everybody see that? So one of the things that's the visual field, you're going to have two visual fields. You're going to have your nasal visual field, which is the visual field or the thing you can see that's closest to the middle or closest to your nose. And then you're going to have your temporal visual fields, which are going to be all over here on the outsides. Okay, your temporal visual fields are the ones that are closest to the temple of your heads. So essentially, right eye, you can see your entire nasal and temporal visual field, but you can only see the nasal visual field of the left. Okay, and conversely, left eye sees all the left visual field, but only the nasal visual field from the right. All right, now let's start with the right eye, and all we're going to do is trace these visual fields back, because we go starting here. Let's say this is, I want to know what this eye can see. I'm not going to worry about this eye right yet. I'm only looking at what this eye can see and how it sees it. Okay, it's going to be able to see if I trace it back. I'm going to trace everything back. So using, and this is my retina, okay, this is going to be my temporal retina, is going to receive the nasal visual field. Okay. And my temporal visual field for the right eye is going to be received by the nasal retina. And I said before that these retina, they just connect into one big axon that becomes your optic nerve. So essentially, they go right out the back of the eyeball. But that's what I can see with my right eye. And I can see this little bit of blue here, and I can see all the red. Kind of. And the same thing for the left eye. If I start with my nasal visual field, this nasal visual field that I have here in existence projects to my temporal retina of my left eye. And the temporal visual field projects to my nasal retina. Questions about that? This is the thing to go back to if you have trouble following it later. Okay, and I'll go through it again if you want me to. It's no problem. But this is the most important part. Once you get this down and are able to follow things, then everything else is easy. But people have trouble getting this down. Yes?
I just want to make So
Mhm.
the temporal visual field would go to the nasal retina.
Always.
And opposite.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Temporal visual field goes to the nasal retina, and the nasal visual field goes to the temporal retina of each eye. Bless you. And since only one eye can see the temporal, it's pretty easy to figure out which eye that belongs to. That makes sense? Okay, so visual fields in a nutshell. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go from visual fields and retina to further back. So in other words, what pathway does vision travel after it's received by the retina to go all the way back to the occipital lobe? That's the next part. Okay, so we'll switch over from visual fields to something called visual tracts. It should be a T. Visual tracts. Okay. So let's go ahead and this is the nose. Okay, I have two eyeballs here, and this is my rendition of an ear. Okay, on the side. Okay, back here we have the occipital lobe. Okay, this is just representative of the occipital lobe, and I'll write that in there. So. Okay, that's your occipital lobe. Got it? And yeah, occipital lobe has a top part and a bottom part. So the very top part, and this is representative of the top part here, that's going to be superior, and this is going to be inferior. That's nothing more. So these are the two sides of the lobe. So this would be the right side of the occipital, left side of the occipital lobe, and the topmost portion of the occipital lobe is going to be called superior. The bottommost portion is going to be inferior. Everybody see that? So I'm just trying to trace the pathway of vision all the way back to that occipital lobe. Putting in some players here. Okay, one player we're going to have to worry about is, somebody asked me the other day, was there a nucleus that was associated with vision, right? The second cranial nerve, because we saw all these other nuclei like ocular motor and Ettinger-Westphal, trochlear nucleus, abducens, dorsal motor, all these other things. But what about vision? Does it go through a nucleus? It does go through a nucleus, but it's a nucleus in the thalamus. Okay, it's not in the brainstem proper. And I'm just going to depict that here. And just make a circle. And this is going to be a nucleus in the thalamus. And you should know that specifically vision goes through something known as the lateral geniculate, G-E-N-I-C-U-L-A-T-E, nucleus. And this nucleus is in the thalamus. And it's bilateral. Okay, so that's the nucleus that we associate with vision, but it's not in the brainstem, it's in the thalamus. Like I said before, all sensory information goes through the thalamus except for olfactory. Olfactory doesn't make it there. That's the only one. Okay, now let's go through and label some of these other things. So, as I said, coming out, exiting out the back of the eyeball, this right here, and this is something that we cut when we pulled the brains, if you guys remember. I asked you to, and a lot of people say, well, there's like an X structure there. What is that? It's like, don't cut that. That's not what we want. We just want to cut here. This is called your optic nerve. And that's cranial nerve number 2. And that's nothing more than the retinal axons that were exiting out the back of the eyeball. So that part from the back of the eyeball all the way up to this X-like structure, that's your optic nerve. Okay, and this X-like structure has a special name. It's called your optic chiasm, C-H-I-A-S-M. Okay, your optic chiasm actually sits just in the area of the pituitary gland. So a lot of times if you have a pituitary tumor that impinges on that optic chiasm, you have some very, very special visual presentations, and that's one thing that we should be aware of. Okay, we'll talk about that as we go. And then moving on back, so you have your optic nerve, your optic chiasm, that's just this whole X-like structure here. And then moving on back, this is called your optic tract. T-R-A-C-T. Okay? So all the basic parts. Okay, so what we did before, we said this is going to be my right side, this is going to be my left side, that's my right eye, that's my left eye, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw in my visual fields. And I said before that R was for right and red, so we're going to put the red visual field, the entire visual field, just like we did before, just in front of us so we can trace it back. And then all the way over here to the left is going to be your blue. Questions? Okay, good. This is a perfect place for a break. Take a 10-minute break and we'll regroup.